The great hall of the Galactic Council was quiet when the human walked in. She was short compared to most aliens there. The smallest species in the room still stood taller than her by a full head. Her hair was dark with streaks of gray, and her face showed the lines of someone who had lived many years. But the thing that caught everyone's attention was the scar. It ran along her jaw, a thin white line against her brown skin. The Volthrani ambassador leaned toward his assistant. He whispered something about the mark on her face. He wondered why she had not fixed it. His species could heal any wound without a trace. Most advanced species could do the same. Why would anyone choose to keep such damage visible? The human heard him. She always heard everything, but she said nothing. She walked to her seat at the far end of the long table. This was the spot for new species. The ones asking for help. The ones begging for protection. Every young civilization that came to this council sat in that exact chair and asked the older species to keep them safe. The High Judge was a being made of living crystal. He was older than most stars. He began to speak in a voice like wind chimes. He explained what humans would get if they joined as a protected species. They would receive weapons. They would receive medicine. They would receive help building their ships. In return, they would follow the rules of the council. They would send resources. They would accept their place below the older species. The human listened without speaking. When the High Judge finished, she stood up. She walked to the center of the room where everyone could see her. She moved slowly and with purpose. Every eye and sensor in the chamber followed her dot. She said she had a question. The High Judge told her to ask. She wanted to know what happened when a protected species was attacked. The High Judge explained the process. First, there would be an investigation. This might take several weeks. Then, there would be a vote. If the attack broke the rules, there would be punishments. In very bad cases, the council might send ships to help. This could take 2 or 3 months from start to finish. The human nodded slowly. Then she asked about the Karathi. The room went very still. The Karathi had been a protected species 300 years ago. They were small and peaceful. They made beautiful music and art. Then the Burning Empire attacked their world. The council investigated. The council voted. The council punished the empire with trade restrictions. By the time help arrived, the Karathi were all dead. Every single one. Their planet was burned black. The High Judge said that was a sad event. He said the council had made new rules to prevent it from happening again. The human touched the scar on her jaw. She said she got this mark when she was 12 years old. A boy in her village pushed her down. She hit her face on a rock. She was now 53. 41 years had passed. She still remembered his face. She remembered the color of the rock. She remembered the taste of blood. She remembered the sound of him laughing at her pain. The Volthrani ambassador spoke up. He asked what this story had to do with the discussion about protection. The human said it had everything to do with it. She explained that humans do not forget. Other species store memories like files in a computer. They look at them when needed and put them away when not. Humans are different. Humans carry their memories with them always. Every hurt becomes part of who they are. Every wound shapes their soul. They do not heal the way other species heal. They grow around the damage, making it part of themselves forever. She walked around the table as she spoke. She told them about human history. She told them about wars that ended centuries ago, but were still remembered with anger. She told them about hatred passed from parents to children to grandchildren. She told them about statues built to remember defeats that happened before anyone alive was born. The High Judge interrupted. He said this was worrying. He asked if humans could not forgive. The human smiled, but it was not a happy smile. She said humans could forgive. Many of them did, but forgiving and forgetting were two different things. A human might forgive the boy who hurt her. She had forgiven him years ago, but she would never forget what he did. She could not forget. It was impossible for her kind. She returned to her seat. She said humanity was not interested in being a protected species. They had read the history. They had counted the dead species who had trusted the council to save them. The Karathi were just one example. There were dozens of others. She said humanity wanted something different. They wanted to join as equals. Full members with full rights. No one above them, no one below them. The room exploded with noise. Several ambassadors stood up in anger. The Velthrani called it ridiculous. The Christari demanded to know who humans thought they were. The ambassador from the burning empire laughed, a sound like metal scraping metal. The human waited for quiet. When it came, she spoke again. She said humanity had studied the council's war records. They had seen how long it took for help to arrive. They had counted how many died during the waiting. And they had made a decision. If anyone attacked humanity, there would be no waiting for investigations. There would be no votes. Humanity would remember every death. Humanity would carry those scars forever. And humanity would respond right away with everything they had for as long as needed. She said this was not a threat. It was simply what humans were. They remembered every scar. And they never, ever forgot. The council voted against human membership. This surprised no one. The old species had no interest in sharing power with newcomers. The human ambassador accepted the result with a small nod. She left the chamber without argument. Most ambassadors thought that would be the end of it. They believed humans would come back later, scared and desperate, ready to accept whatever terms they were given. 3 months later, the burning empire attacked the human colony. The planet was called New Haven. It was a small world at the edge of human space. Only 5,000 people lived there. Farmers mostly. Families with children. The empire saw it as a test. They wanted to see what humans would do. They expected crying and begging. They expected humans to run back to the council, asking for help. The attack killed 2,000 people before the survivors could escape. The empire ships burned the farms and the houses. They destroyed the schools and the hospitals. They left nothing but ash and bones. The council began its investigation. Committees were formed. Reports were written. Meetings were scheduled. The process would take about 6 weeks before anyone decided what to do. The humans did not wait 6 weeks. They did not wait 6 days. They did not even wait 6 hours. Within 2 days, a human fleet appeared deep inside Empire space. It was not a big fleet. Just 12 ships, none of them very large. The Empire had thousands of warships. Their generals looked at the numbers and laughed. 12 ships against an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. It was a joke, but the human ships did something strange. They did not attack the Empire's military. They flew right past the defense stations. They jumped through space in ways that should have been impossible. They appeared suddenly in orbit around the Empire's home planet, the heart of their civilization. A human officer sent a message to both the Empire and the Council. She had a hard face and cold eyes. Her voice was steady and calm. She said 2,000 humans were dead. The Empire had killed them. The humans had come to talk about surrender. The Empire laughed again. Their home world had weapons that could destroy 100 ships. They had armies numbering in the billions. They had bombs that could crack planets in half. 12 small human ships were nothing. Less than nothing. The human officer said she understood. She said humans had studied the Empire's history. They knew about all the worlds the Empire had burned. They knew the Empire only respected strength. She said humans had a different belief. Humans believed in memory. One ship broke away from the human fleet. It flew toward the planet below. It was moving faster than anything the Empire had ever seen. Their weapons fired, but the ship was too quick. It was not trying to land. It was not trying to survive. It was trying to hit the ground. The explosion lit up the sky. The ship had been carrying something terrible. It blew up above the Empire's capital city. The blast was perfectly aimed. It destroyed the government buildings. It destroyed the military headquarters. It killed every high-ranking Empire leader in an instant. Millions died in less than a second. The human officer sent another message. Her voice had not changed. She was still calm, still cold. She said that was payment for the first 100 dead colonists. She said 11 ships remained. Each ship carried the same weapon. Each ship had a crew who knew they would die. Each ship was named after one of the dead children of New Haven. She asked if the Empire wanted to keep talking. The council fell into chaos. This broke every rule. This violated every agreement about how wars should be fought. The Crystari demanded that humanity be punished. The Velfrani called for immediate military action against the humans. The High Judge asked everyone to stay calm and think clearly. The burning empire surrendered before the hour was over. The terms were simple. The Empire would pay money to every family that had lost someone on New Haven. The Empire would hand over the officers who had ordered the attack. The Empire would sign a peace agreement that would last 1,000 years. The Empire would promise never to harm another human as long as their civilization existed. The Empire agreed to everything. They had no choice. 11 ships still floated in their sky, each one ready to fall. The human ambassador came back to the council 3 days later. She sat in the same chair, the one meant for weak and young species. But no one looked at her the same way anymore. The Velfrani did not whisper. The Crystari did not demand. The ambassador from the burning empire was not there. His replacement sat quietly with empty eyes. The human said she still wanted the same thing. Full membership. Equal status. Nothing had changed from humanity's point of view. The High Judge asked how she could say that. Millions had died. An empire that had existed for 10,000 years had been broken in hours. The human touched her scar. She said the empire had killed 2,000 humans. The humans had answered. That was simply what they were. The empire would remember this day. Their children would remember. Their grandchildren would remember. 1,000 years from now, they would still tell stories about what happened when they hurt humanity. She said that was the whole point. Humans remembered every scar, and they made very sure that everyone else remembered too. The second vote for human membership also failed. But this time, the result was closer. Species that had voted against now chose to stay silent. Species that had stayed silent now voted yes. The balance was changing, slowly but clearly. The human ambassador thanked the council and said she would return with the same request next time. She said humans were patient. They could wait. They had learned how to wait through thousands of years of history. Before she could leave, the old Velfrani ambassador stopped her. He was ancient, even by his species standards. He had served on the council for longer than most civilizations had existed. He said he had a question that had been bothering him since the day the empire fell. The human said she would try to answer. He asked about the ship crews. 11 ships had stayed in orbit after the first one struck. Each crew knew they would die if ordered to attack. He wanted to know how humans could find people willing to do that. He wanted to understand what could make someone accept certain death. The human was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down, which surprised everyone. Ambassadors did not sit for casual talks. But she seemed to think this question deserved a proper answer. She talked about something humans call legacy. She explained that all humans know they will die. From a very young age, every human understands that they are temporary. They will exist for a short time, then they will be gone forever. This knowledge changes everything about them. It makes them want desperately to leave something behind, something that will last after they are gone. The crew members who volunteered knew exactly what they were choosing. They knew they would not survive, but they also knew their names would never be forgotten. Their actions would become part of human history. Teachers would tell their story to children for generations to come. In a strange way, by dying, they would live forever in human memory. The Velthrani shook his head. He did not understand. His species lived for thousands of years. Death was something far away, something that happened to the very old or the very unlucky. The idea of running toward death, of finding meaning in sacrifice, made no sense to him at all. The human could see his confusion. She tried to explain it differently. She asked him to imagine watching his children grow old and die. Then his grandchildren. Then their children. Generation after generation, watching everyone he loved turn to dust while he kept living. She asked him to imagine carrying that sadness for thousands of years. The Velthrani said he did not need to imagine. He had lived it. He had watched more loved ones die than he could count. That was the price of a long life. The human nodded. That was exactly her point. He remembered all of them, did he not? He carried them inside himself. Their lives had meaning because he kept them in his memory. Their deaths shaped who he was. They influenced how he thought and what he believed. She said humans were the same, but squeezed into shorter lives. They did not have thousands of years to deal with their grief. They had only decades. So everything hit them harder. Every loss cut deeper. Every scar stayed with them more strongly. And the need to be remembered, to leave something behind before they vanished, burned hotter than any long-lived species could ever know. The Velthrani thought about this for a long time. Then he asked another question. He asked about the boy who had scarred her face, the one she had mentioned in her first speech to the council. What happened to him? Something changed in the human's eyes. A complicated look crossed her face, something the translation machines could not fully explain. She said the boy had grown into a man. He joined the military when he was 18. He spent his life protecting others. When he was 34, raiders attacked a small colony. He died defending that colony. He saved 11 children before he fell. He carried the last one to safety with bullets in his chest, then collapsed and never got up again. She said she went to his memorial service. She spoke to his children and told them their father was a hero. She meant every word she said. The Velthrani asked if she had forgiven him for what he did when they were young. The human touched her scar again. She said yes. She had forgiven him many years ago. Forgiveness was something humans did for themselves, not for the people who hurt them. It let them put down the weight of anger and move forward with their lives. But she still remembered. She would always remember. The rock, the blood, the laughter. Those memories were part of her now, woven into who she was. Forgiveness did not erase them. Nothing could erase them. She said this was what made humans truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their willingness to die. It was their memory. They could love and forgive and build new things. But they never forgot. The past walked beside them always, shaping every step they took into the future. The Velthrani thanked her for explaining. He said he would think about everything she told him. He said he was beginning to understand why the Burning Empire had given up so fast. The human said understanding was a good start. She said humans did not want enemies. They wanted partners and friends. That they would never be victims again. They had been victims too many times in their own history. They carried those scars too. And they had learned something from every single wound. She left the chamber, and the old Velthrani watched her go. He found himself thinking about his own ancestors. The ones who died before he was born. the ones he had only heard stories about. He wondered if he truly remembered them the way humans remembered their dead. He suspected the answer was no. 5 years passed. The human ambassador came back to the council every cycle with the same request. Each time, more species voted in her favor. Each time, the gap between yes and no grew smaller. In those 5 years, humanity did not start any fights. They did not threaten anyone. They traded fairly with every species. They kept their promises. They treated everyone with respect. The fear that had spread after the Empire incident began to fade. Something else took its place. Something more complicated. The Crystari were the first major power to change their vote. Their speaker explained that they had studied human history very carefully. They had found something amazing. Humans had spent most of their existence fighting each other. They had done terrible things to their own kind. But they had also shown an incredible ability to make peace. Countries that tried to destroy each other became friends within a few decades. Groups that had been enemies for hundreds of years learned to live side by side. The same species that remembered every hurt also found ways to heal. They remembered the pain, but they chose to build something better anyway. The Crystari speaker said this was the most amazing thing about humans. They carried their wounds forever, but they did not let those wounds control their future. They used their memories to make better choices, not worse ones. Other species followed one by one. The Velthrani changed their vote after their old ambassador retired. His replacement was younger and had spent years studying human ways. She said her people could learn much from beings who lived so briefly but shone so brightly. Even the burning empire spoke in favor of humanity. Their new representative said his people had learned something unexpected in the past 5 years. They had expected hatred from the humans. They had expected constant revenge. Instead, they received something strange. The humans called it moving forward. It did not mean forgetting. The empire would never forget what happened. But it meant building something new, instead of living forever in the ashes of the old. Human aid workers had helped rebuild empire cities. Human doctors had treated empire sick. Human teachers had taught empire children. The peace agreement was being honored on both sides. The scars remained, but new growth was covering them. The vote passed in the 6th year. Humanity became full members of the Galactic Council with all rights and responsibilities. The human ambassador stood to speak one last time. She was older now. The lines on her face had deepened. Her hair was more gray than dark. The scar on her jaw had faded slightly, but it was still there. It would always be there. She thanked the council for their decision. She said humanity was excited to work with all species as equals. She said they would keep their promises and follow the rules. Then she said something the council would never forget. She said humanity had a gift to offer. Not weapons, not machines, not money. Something more valuable. Humans could teach other species how to remember properly. She explained that many council species lived for thousands of years. Time moved differently for them. They forgot things that happened centuries ago because centuries meant nothing to them. But this forgetting had a price. They made the same mistakes again and again. They failed to learn from the past. They let old crimes fade from memory, which meant those crimes could happen again. Humans could teach them to remember the right way. Not with hatred, not with revenge, but with purpose. To carry the scars forward so they would never forget how they got them. To honor the dead by learning from their deaths. To build monuments not to celebrate old wars, but to make sure new ones would not happen. She said the Karathi had been forgotten. 300 years, and no one in the council had thought him until she said their name. An entire species, wiped out completely, and their memory had disappeared like morning mist. Humans would not let that happen again. Humans would remember the Karathi. They would build statues. They would write songs. They would make sure every human child learned that name and understood what it meant. The Karathi would live on in human memory long after everyone else had forgotten them, because that was what humans did. They remembered every scar, every wound, every loss. And they used those memories to build a future where fewer scars would be made. The humans sat down. The council was silent. Then, slowly, the Volfrani ambassador began to clap her hands together. It was an old human custom that had spread to some other species. One by one, others joined in. The High Judge watched with his ancient crystal eyes. He had lived for 10,000 years. He had seen countless species join the council, but he had never seen anything like this. He thought about the Karathi. He felt shame when he realized he could not remember their faces. He could not remember their music or their stories or how they laughed. They were just a name in an old report, a number in a file, a footnote in history that almost no one read anymore. He looked at the human ambassador, at the scar on her jaw, at the weight of memory she carried so visibly. And finally, after 10,000 years of life, he understood what made humans so dangerous and so valuable at the same time. They remembered everything, and they made sure no one else could ever forget. That was their gift. That was their burden. That was what made them human.